Alright, time for another DraftScience.com video presentation. So, the Ian Gostling is continuing to do what he does, and which is attempt to contrive experiments to demonstrate something. In this case, he's attempting to demonstrate that I was wrong about what I said about my predictions, I guess, regarding what the flaw was in his previous lever experiment. Now, I did point out that, I mentioned numerous things that I thought were a flaw. So, causing an effect that I say they can't account for. Now, from the very beginning, I have been attempting to argue that there has to be a theory here somewhere. So if you're going to describe function, you ought to be able to describe why it does what it does. What's the mechanism? And they won't provide that information of how their kinetic energy system conserves energy, how it functions, how it works. That's something, I transfer the energy from a light thing into a heavy thing, and I lose a whole bunch of energy, and then I transfer the energy from a heavy thing to a light thing, and I gain a whole bunch of extra energy because of the squared velocity term. And it's just a squared term. Again, they won't really explain why they know momentum is a vector, and they know whatever kinetic energy is, it's a scalar. It doesn't subtract, but momentum subtracts. How they know this to be true, what physical experiment demonstrates it to be true. So anyway, let's go over. There's two versions, two types of experiments they have done. Okay, they're playing with. Let's just say. Now, one Brozo did, with a spring. All right, and not using gravity. So this one is laid flat on a surface, and gravity doesn't really have any role to play whatsoever. And the idea is you take a 2 mass here and a 1 mass here, and you do the experiment with those independently. And the 2 mass, momentum would argue that these two things are interchangeable. This at twice the velocity, half the mass at twice the velocity, is basically you're just doing the big M small v thing, that you're going to convert a small m into a big V, and then over here you're going to have a big M with the half the size of the V. So you're just doing a sensible equality in understanding that the mass and the velocity play an equal role. And yes, the results of the experiment were pretty much 2 to 1. You got twice the velocity here that you had here with the same spring compression. So that's the experiment we want confirmed. They say that's a fluke, and they think that they can do the experiment and demonstrate that this won't go at twice the velocity with the same energy put in on this other side. And then there's the gravity experiment. So these are the ones that Ian has been doing. Ian. Balancing the lever, because I made a simple claim that if I did do an experiment with a lever, and I were to test you by putting and you couldn't tell which mass I had on the lever, the 2 mass here or the 1 mass 2 distances away, that if you pressed on a point that you couldn't tell the difference, which means everything would have to move the same. This is really a weight on the lever, and this is a weight. And the weight is being created by gravity, which is the tricky part. It's it hasn't been explained, and how exactly gravity gets into the lever. How it stores the energy, because it's not going to be doing the falling 4 times the distance thing. All of that stuff is going away inside the lever. The lever's not going to have twice the velocity isn't going to be 4 times the distance when a lever functions. So in the current, I would call it a kind of paradox. All right, so you have the 2 mass here and you have the 1 mass here. That's probably the best illustration. Okay, and there's your center fulcrum. So this is twice the distance and half the mass, and this will balance. Okay, so it will seek balance. And so in this case, we're not putting a set amount of energy into the lever. You're just doing this. You're raising it, lifting it a distance out of balance. I mean, I should have drawn that a little proportionally, but whatever. You get the idea. I'm lifting it out of balance. So I'm taking it, lifting it out of balance, and then letting it go. And it oscillates. Now, the faster it oscillates means that the objects are going a speed, and if it oscillates slower in this condition versus this condition, 2 mass and a 2 mass equidistant from the fulcrum, that demonstrates something. Well, as I pointed out, this is only 3 masses and this is 4 masses, so that is a difference. And then you could speculate that there would be even slower oscillation if I were to put just the 1 masses, because then I only have 2 masses. So this would be a 2 mass experiment, this would be a 4 mass experiment, and this would be a 3 mass experiment. So that's an obvious difference. And I'm still arguing that this is only because this is how you're putting the energy in, is by unbalancing the lever. And the lever will go back to its balance with a certain amount of energy. You're not hitting it with a known force. It's not like you're dropping a 2 mass here and then seeing what happens. You're not putting energy in to a balance lever. You're unbalancing the lever and then watching it balance, which is a different scenario. All right. So the trick is, no matter which configuration I have, this side goes down, okay? And it oscillates and finds balance eventually, but it definitely goes down. Now, Ian is still of the belief, even though I could understand that maybe a year ago or 2 years ago. If you would have asked me, I probably would have given a simpleton answer, okay, to the question. You giving me an unbalanced lever, I'd say, oh, well, this is higher up in the gravity. But you can't use that argument because it doesn't make any sense. It's less mass in the first place, and the higher up part doesn't make any sense because gravitational potential energy goes down as you go up. So as you go up, okay, it goes down. So it goes, it's the 9.8 here and at the surface, and then you go in, it goes down, and you go up, it goes down. It doesn't increase. Your mass doesn't increase as you go up. Okay, your mass decreases. The further you get from Earth, the less you weigh. There's a distance you could go where you weigh 1/6, like you weigh on the moon. And there's a distance that's 1/5 and 1/3 and 1/20th, and it gets weaker and weaker the higher you go. So the fact is, this 2 mass here isn't in more gravity, it's in less gravity. Less. The higher you go, the less you weigh. So why is the thing that weighs less pushing the lever down? These are both being hit by gravity. They're both putting a pressure in this direction. And essentially, which you can't fall for, even though it's a tiny difference in height, it's certainly not more gravity here. How far it can go until it hits a flat surface is really irrelevant. This would be like saying, well, if I dig a hole under one side and I have flat ground, so it's 10 feet above the ground, and I dig a hole over here, that somehow because this one can fall further, it has more gravity. That would be silly. You can't see the hole, but it's there. Yeah, down there. Yeah, that would be silly. How much energy you have happens up here. It doesn't happen based on distance. It happens incrementally as you're falling. The force is collected. It's collected from the top down, so to speak. It doesn't know how far away the ground is. And so your gravitational potential isn't about this distance. It's just about the fact that you're allowed to fall the distance, and you will keep incurring more gravity. You'll spend more time in the gravity. So it's about how much time you're in the gravity. And these two will be in the gravity. They're both being hit. They're both getting the same amount of gravity hitting them. So why don't they just stay where they are? You know, if it's equal gravity, what's the problem? And the same is true for the lever with no weights on it, right? I can make the lever. You can barely see that one. I drew too extensively. So I mean, I could just make the plain lever, no weights on it. Okay, it's the same mass on both sides, the same mass getting hit by the same force. So the same force over here as you have over here, same pressure down. Why does this side move down, and why, more importantly, does this side move up? It technically weighs more. This side is lower in the gravity. It's closer to the Earth. It's in more gravity. Why doesn't this side, the heavy side, and it just swings this way? I mean, it doesn't make any sense that it goes exactly the opposite. The heavy side swings up. So it's a bit of a paradox. Now, I've tried to dissect that, try to figure out, well, it's some kind of center of mass argument. And because this mass is this angle, that is, it's hanging down this angle, and this one's this angle, you know, from straight down, this angle is smaller than this angle. And so it's changing the center of the mass, to this side. That it's more spread out over here, more condensed on this side. The mass is closer to the fulcrum. And so therefore this side falls because there's the center of mass changes. But the fact is, his own experiments are demonstrating that if you're using gravity to do this, you'll get a different amount of force, okay, depending on what the total mass is of the lever plus the masses. So it's about the mass. It can detect the mass. But that doesn't change the argument that it can't detect the weight. Okay, and the weight will still be the weight. So what gravity's doing, how you're storing the energy in gravity, is not directly proportional to the weight. It's directly proportional to the mass of the whole lever. And it's the mass of the whole lever in which you're putting the energy in. And to some extent you can understand that makes sense, because if the lever's swinging up, you could get hit by any portion. You could put your nose here, or you could put your nose here, or you could put your nose here. And you would argue, okay, that all those positions will be the same momentum hitting you. And what is it the momentum of? It's the movement of all the pieces of mass, the lever itself. So again, I could do it with just a plain lever. I don't have to put any weights on it, and it's still going to oscillate and still going to hit you. And so what's it hitting you with? It's not hitting you with the masses wherever it's distributed. It's combining all the masses and hitting you with all the mass of the lever, whatever the mass of the total lever is in motion. It's momentum. The momentum of all the atoms. It's essentially a spinning disk at any one point. It just spins in opposite directions, which is really weird, frankly. It's weird in the sense that there's nothing intuitive about it. The brain keeps wanting to say, this is higher, therefore it weighs more. It wants to say that, and it's just plain wrong. This is less than 9.8. This is more than 9.8. They're tiny fractions, but it's a fact. And so this technically is in less gravity, therefore it doesn't weigh, okay? It's exact mass. This is like this is on the moon and this is on Earth. I mean, it's not the same. It's vice versa. This is like the one on Earth. It's more gravity. So again, it's really hard to just intuitively think higher doesn't mean anything, but it really doesn't. All right, back. All right, so just to say it again, because apparently you need to do that. It'd be nice if this black thing worked better. Anyway, so the balance lever is what it seeks. It seeks a balance. And so I take this stick, okay, with a fulcrum, and I have an equal amount of mass, and I can imbalance it. I can shave a little bit off, and it'll, tilt. And the question is, why does, okay, a side that technically isn't any lighter, move down. So, if the lever's in this position, the fact is this side isn't in more gravity. It's not more gravity up here. It's a little bit less than here. So this side technically is heavier. It's closer to the earth. It's heavier. Okay, this is the plus side, and this is the minus side. Why is the minus side appearing to push it down? Now you could say the plus side is attempting to push it up, and that's even, it still doesn't make any sense. Why would the heavier side try to go up? So it's obviously some sort of buoyancy that takes place, and it has something to do, again, with these positions, I would argue. The fact is that there is an angle here to the perpendicular, and the angle creates an angle here, and that angle here, okay, is smaller, okay, than the angle on this side. So that's changing the center of mass of the entire lever, and so the entire lever's center of mass is somehow rising, okay, because of that position and that angle that the masses are interpreted. Now you could argue if I put the masses above the lever, I'm going to get the opposite angles. But I don't think it's going to make a difference. I don't think we're going to see any difference. So that's what partially came up in this conversation, as I was talking about the ideal lever and how to suspend masses. And I talked about the fact that the traditional simple scale uses little wires or chains to hold up things that you can put the masses on, so everything stays parallel and flat. And I think it also makes sure that the weight is in exactly the place you want it. So you're forcing the balance to work correctly because you're placing the weight at exactly the right location. And that they also make the same stick balance inversions, okay, where they use some leverage mechanisms to create the same effect above the lever, where these things move directly up and down instead of moving in a rotation. Instead of moving angularly through space, they move up and down instead. And those were, in my opinion, improvements in the function of the scale. So if you're going to do the experiments, I would tend to argue that's what you want to do, is to make sure the weight is always centered as it moves. It's always in the same position. It isn't rotating, in some other angle to the ground. It's always got the same orientation to the ground, up and down. So if you hang them, that happens. Alright, so I can't really emphasize this enough. So if Ian wants to explain to me, okay, how the 5 mass, the half mass, actually pushes the lever down, even though it's technically, right, this is the 1 mass, this is the 2 mass, it's technically in less gravity, and it obviously, if we're adding gravitational potential, it has less mass. So, how does the less massive thing push up the more massive thing when the less massive thing is in less gravity? There's less force it could possibly collect per second, per millisecond, per billionth of a second. There's actually less force impacting it. So how does it do that? How does the lever do that? And I'd argue, there's a complexity to it somewhere, where somehow the center of mass of the entire lever, that is adding these weights plus the weight of the lever, does move in this direction, the one that's higher, whatever's higher direction. I can just reverse this lever and lift the 2 mass against the 1 mass, and that looks more sensible, the 2 mass winning. But I'm just saying it's the same dynamic. You got the same problem. In the sense it doesn't on its face make any sense. that the thing in the less gravity is winning. Okay, the war. There's a fight between these two things, and somehow the one in the less gravity is winning, and it's on its face. Doesn't make any sense. So that's why I ask people to draw a lever and explain how it works, is because it's not as it's not as obvious. Now again, none of this has anything to do with the two arguments I'm making. The fact that a pressure here, a weight placed here at this location, will balance with either a 1 here or a 2 here, let's say. It just doesn't matter. I can put a 1/4 here. I mean, I can just keep changing proportionally to distance, and these things will all weigh the same. The weight registered here, the amount of felt weight, will be the same with any one of those configurations. And that on its face means that all of these things will, the lever itself will move exactly the same in all those circumstances with an applied force. Okay, so he's using gravity, and we know in gravity this is the trick. The lever stores in gravity by some mechanics that isn't apparent. Somehow this center of mass is switching from this side to this side and causing the oscillation. And the mass of the whole lever is the mass that's the center of gravity that's moving. It's changing one side of the lever from weighing, say, 3 pounds to weighing 2.9, and the other side ends up weighing 3.1, and then it switches back and forth. And that's sort of consistent with the fact that the lever balances with a pretty low energy. It's not very aggressive, and not as aggressive as an applied force. And the other thing I'm asserting, okay, is that the movement of this lever will be the same if the weights are equal. And it doesn't matter what mass you use, it just matters that the weights are equal. And the other assertion is that levers will, in fact, convert 10 mass objects going 5 velocity into 5 mass objects going 10 velocity. That I can do a perfect conversion between a big M and a small v, and I can, with a lever, convert it into a small m and a big v. So, he's not denting any of those predictions, assertions that levers do in fact conserve momentum. So I could put the 5 mass going 10 velocity in here and here, 1 unit of distance. I can push up a 10 mass, okay, going 5 velocity. Now their theory says that if I do these experiments, they'll tell me in a sense that this, if I do it this way, if I drop the 10 mass going 5 at this location, that the 5 mass will only go 7. Okay, it won't go 10. So I'll lose momentum, but I will gain 1.4 extra whatever kinetic energy. I'll have the same kinetic energy, so it conserves kinetic energy, where I'm asserting that no, it conserves momentum. Momentum's the thing, the energy you have to conserve, you always have to conserve. Nature can't finagle with momentum. That's the one you have to conserve, and levers do conserve it, and it does work. Now what's their proposition is that what I could actually do and conserve the kinetic energy, his prediction would be that I could put a 5 mass going 10 in here. Okay, so it's a 5 mass, 2 units of distance, and I could actually put 2 10s here. Okay, and going 5. So I could actually make 2 10s going 5 with the energy of 1 5 going 10. Now that's their theory, okay? And so they haven't given us the answer, that it conserves one momentum one way, but it doesn't conserve it the other way. so they won't tell me what their prediction is. So what's their prediction? You know, I'll just say, Ian, what's your prediction? I hit this side with a 5 mass, 2 units of distance, going 10. What's going to happen over here? I mean, what am I going to conserve? If I'm going to conserve the kinetic energy, I'm able to move 2 10s 5. Because you're saying this has 4 times the energy. Well, twice the energy. So you have to sort of explain, what do you think happens over here? Or does it do the same thing where it loses a big giant piece? Well, you can't say it loses kinetic energy, because in the other case, it didn't lose kinetic energy. When I dropped the 10 and got the, attempting to get the 5, you conserve the kinetic energy, but you lost momentum. What are you going to do here? How are you going to conserve the kinetic energy? You literally have to believe that you could do this, that you could move 2 10 masses 5 with a 5 going 10. I don't think you buy that, but who knows? Maybe you do. But it'd be nice to know your prediction. What does it happen when I do the experiment the opposite way? And you have to concede that, well, until somebody does it, we don't have great examples. All we have is Brozo's experiment, and we don't have the literal event of just having something of a velocity rolled into a lever. We're doing all this gravity stuff instead of just taking something flat, okay, with a lever flat, and banging things into a flat, lever flat on the ground that can move this way. So we take gravity out of it and see what these experiments produce. Alright, so that's the context. So there's no, I'm not trying to deceive anybody, I'm just making assertions that levers are only so smart, okay? They can't, I don't think they can do what these people claim. And I'm saying that obviously the difference in the lever's oscillation speed has to do with the fact that although you have changed the weight of objects in the gravity, you have changed, you can't change the masses. So the fact is that in the case where you put the smaller masses further out, the lever does in fact have less mass on it. So whether I put 2 of them out and balance it, or whether I have 2 mass here and a 1 mass out here at different distances, the fact is the whole lever has a different weight and a different mass, and it's the mass that's going to decide what gravity does to it. And somehow the lever knows which experiment has more mass in it, and it's giving it velocity based on that, because one will collect more energy than the other, and that's why they'll oscillate at a different speed. Well, let's understand when it is oscillating, the fact that the 2 mass here has the same momentum, okay, as the light mass out here, you can't deny that. So if the whole system oscillates at a slower speed, you're not changing the 2-to-1 relationship between this mass and this mass as masses. And if you could get them to leave the lever, give them enough momentum, speed, velocity, that they would in fact still be leaving at exactly the speed they were moving, and that will be 2-to-1, not 1.4 to 2. Yeah, okay. So anyway, that's the context. So I just watched the second video just to see that, okay, he changed the lever. So he had a lever on a rotating object, so the lever itself was oscillating. So the lever wasn't pivoting on a center, it was oscillating on a center. And I said, well, that's got to be a problem. Now the fact is, it didn't change the fact that the levers oscillate at different speeds. And again, this whole speed argument, as if the oscillating speed of the lever somehow breaks the fact that this side of the lever way out here, say if this was the fulcrum right here where the black line is, you can't change the fact that it's going to pivot on that point. This end moves twice as far as this end does in the same time. You can't change that fact. So all these experiments are, frankly, not getting directly to the point. So this is sort of like you argue, they say, it takes 4 times the fuel to go twice as fast. They can't produce the experiment that shows that, so they attempt to produce some other contrived experiment, some more complicated experiment, to say it infers the same thing. And so somehow he's inferring that because it's oscillating at a different speed, that somehow it isn't a 2-to-1 relationship, or a 4-to-1, or whatever you do. Changing the masses, but yeah, creating the illusion of the extra weight. And it's a very real illusion in the sense the thing does weigh. It does weigh, and you can do the experiment by applying an external force other than gravity. So I guess I would say is they will oscillate at the same speed if you put an external force in that forces them both to absorb the same external force, because they're not absorbing the same force when you use gravity, because one of the levers actually does weigh more than the other lever. As a fact, it has more mass. So again, you have to be very careful using the words mass and weight. Not the same thing. Weight is momentum. Mass is not.
Ha 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 ha.
All right, so so who knows what he's just going to, I don't know, 8 minutes, but he's probably not going to say anything on the actual subject of how levers work.
You really are such a fucking knobhead.
So he thinks there's more gravity when the lever's up here than when the lever's down here. So that's what he thinks. And he's calling somebody else a knobhead. So you think the closer you are to the Earth, the less gravity you're in. And the further away from the Earth you are, the more gravity you're in. Gee, what a knobhead.
I really don't know what I'm the stupid one.
Yes, I mean, look, it's on its face. Like, I just exaggerate, right? You could just imagine I can make this bigger and bigger, this bearing. And so I could put on a bicycle wheel. You could understand, I have a lever on a bicycle wheel, and the lever rotates on the bicycle wheel. I mean, obviously, it wouldn't be doing the balancing thing very well anymore, would it? And yes, it would tend to want to get to the bottom of the wheel because it's an extra weight on the bicycle wheel. So maybe this is illustrating actually this little tiny subtle difference, and it really doesn't matter how small I make that fulcrum. But I'm just saying you can see the obvious problem that if I take the lever and I do that to it, I'm putting all the mass on one side decidedly, and then on this side decidedly. I mean, all the mass ends up over there, right? So that makes it easy to understand why it moves and oscillates. So, yes, the lever with the tiny fulcrum maybe is doing exactly that same thing. But I'm just saying, by appearances, this isn't what you want. What you want is this. You want the center to stay in the center. You don't want the center over here and then the center over here. So I'm just saying, on its face, it's a legitimate gripe that what you're doing is emphasizing a problem that you want to try to eliminate. Now, maybe you can't. I'm just saying that maybe that's the whole dynamic of the lever, is the very fact that no matter where you put the fulcrum, you always have this problem of rotation. And the fact that the rotation causes there to be more mass on one side than the other. But who knows? I don't know. There's no video. There's no physicist that's going to explain it, right? There's no physics video that explains this dynamic at all or touches it. So this is all new territory.
For wanting to engage with you and then demonstrate things.
So that's not what you wanted to do. What you're trying to constantly do is debunk and you're contriving experiments for that purpose. And as I stated in the other video, you're just saying, here, I'm going to test you again. I'm going to test you again. I'm going to keep doing the experiment in some fucked up way, frankly, and keep saying, find out what I did wrong. Find out what I did wrong. Find out what I did wrong. That's all I see.
Absolutely.
Because you're not doing the basic experiment, right? You're obviously, you can build all of these different levers. Well, why don't you just do what Brozo did? Take a piece of glass, take a spring, set up a lever, and fling objects and see how far they go. See how fast they leave the lever.
I'm not going to be polite anymore. You don't deserve.
You've never been polite.
The absolute rot you come out with is unbelievable. You want your bloody...
You're the rotter, okay? You're saying it. You're saying, as opposed to Professor Lewin's statements, and you're not arguing with Professor Lewin. I mean, you're saying there is no conservation of momentum, that you can prove levers conserve kinetic energy, and that you can prove springs conserve kinetic energy, and you can prove that hydraulics conserve kinetic energy. That's not what conventional physics says. So I'm just saying, what the hell are you talking about? Here I am in the position of defending conventional physics against your attack that somehow we never should even bother thinking about momentum because it really doesn't have to be conserved, and it's not important at all because none of these basic devices bother conserving it. Springs don't conserve it. Again, gravity doesn't conserve it in the sense... it conserves kinetic energy, you're saying. There is equal amounts of kinetic energy on both sides of the lever somehow. Even though visually that would be impossible. But frankly, that's what he's saying.
Block knocked off. And if you don't know what a block is, it's your head.
Whatever.
You are a blockhead.
Whatever. This is well, whatever. This is, it's like arguing with a 70-year-old piece of tissue paper.
You go over and over. You're petty.
Just draw a little, cranky face, with a little hair sticking up. He's a cartoon character. They should have there's probably some old cranky putz from whatever, Australia. It sounds like it anyway. Who talks shit.
The excuses are disgusting, Gary.
So again, it's not an excuse. It is a bizarre interpretation of a lever. I don't know who wouldn't say, why is the center of the fulcrum on a wheel? I mean, why do you have the lever tied to a wheel? I'm sorry. That's not a perverse a statement of, wow, that doesn't seem quite right. I mean, isn't the fulcrum thing supposed to go in the center of the mass? It's not supposed to be moving the center of the mass.
You go over and over the same fucking details with you.
Well, that's all you do is the same, you make a statement in a video and then you just make the same statement over and over and you never really try to explain anything. You did a spring video that was completely incoherent in the sense you didn't explain the energy in or the energy out.
Oh, the bearing is above the centre line of the pivot of the balance. If it was in line with the balance, the fucking thing wouldn't oscillate.
So that's your statement. I'm just saying that I have a lever, and it does oscillate, with no weight on it, and it has a center bearing. So, I don't know. So is that what he's actually going to do that experiment again? So he's going to put it in the center and it won't oscillate? With masses or without masses? I don't think you're going to do that. I don't think that experiment's going to be doable. No matter how, let's say, let's see, how does it... Well, anyway, let's continue. Because that's an interesting observation, that it won't oscillate if the center bearing is perfect, then we don't get any motion. So I can move the lever in this position, and I have the mass higher and all those kind of arguments and but it won't move. It'll just stay there.
We've been up.
Isn't that telling you something? That it's not about the force of gravity. You know, it's about some other mechanism that's causing the motion. Because if it was just gravity, you're saying, well, from the center pivot, if this had more gravity, it should push it down. Well, some other mechanism's at work.
Over that, it would go there and it would stop there.
Okay, so that's his argument. It's okay. I'm saying if the bearing is sufficiently good, it won't stop there. It won't stay there. I mean, it's only a sticky bearing that could allow it to stick somewhere because it's not enough energy. The gravity, like again, the oscillation, when he creates this oscillation, doesn't have much energy in it. Okay, so we're just saying that, yes, you can make it so the amount of friction in the bearing is enough to undo this little differential. There's a little differential. The center of mass is moving a tiny bit. So again, it's this number, like this weighs 40 pounds on this side and there's 40 pounds on this side. I'm changing the center of mass just a hair, so now it's 39.99, right, ounces, and the other side is 40.001, you know, that kind of thing.
Stephen Bro and others have made films, demonstrations on videos about that. It won't fucking oscillate, you cunt.
Okay, I'm just saying it's, yeah, and those are really crappy experiments, frankly. No evidence that it's a really movable lever. So, you know, that's very flexible. And from what I saw the second video you did, this lever sucks. Okay, the bearing does suck. Okay, so he redoes it in the center, and yeah, it sucks.
Excuse my French. You fucking drive me up the fucking wall, you prick.
Whatever.
It has to be below. I was going to have the weights below.
So he calls this draft science deception. So in the next video, right, he has the weights zip tied to the bar. Something I never described as a good idea. I talked about hanging them. Now, wouldn't you think the first thing you do, if you're going to bother taking the bolts out and allowing yourself to zip tie the weight to the bar, wouldn't it occur to you to just make a little hook here to hook the weights on, you know, where they just dangle? You know, they hang from a string. You could just tie a string, a piece of fishing line, so many ways to do it. And he chooses to zip tie them, which makes it much more complicated. You have to cut the zip tie off to change the weights. It's terribly inconvenient. And so we're to believe that he never even tried hanging them from a wire or a thread. Never even tried it. Even though that's how I've talked about it in every case. He never even tried it. Yeah, I don't know. I'm suspicious that there's a deception involved.
And if the weights are suspended down here and they're free to move, it'll do the same problem. It won't fucking oscillate. I don't give a fuck what you're saying now.
Okay, so he doesn't give a fuck about what I'm saying. It's just silly to say it won't oscillate. I mean, I did that experiment right on my porch. I did videotape it oscillating beautifully. I have it right over there. I can just poke it and it oscillates beautifully. So I don't think so. Now, the fact is that my center could be a little bit, tiny bit to the height or to the bottom, because I'm suspending it from a wire. So maybe I'm a little too high than the exact center, but I'm arguing that no, what the real difference is that my fulcrum has very low friction, your fulcrum has very high friction, and you're just absorbing, the friction is greater, okay? The breaking the friction requires more energy than you're putting into the oscillator.
Now that it will. Your piece of shit coat hanger with magnet. Well, a lot of fucking rubbish that was.
So I don't even know why you'd go there and bother with that. It was frankly a very sensitive and very precise balance. I mean, the tiniest little, you could just file off a few little tiny pieces of of steel and see the difference. It was a really precise, very good lever. And the fact that you could use the magnets and just slide them into any position was, really interesting, and provides opportunity to test different things. So it's just stupid to say it wasn't a good lever. Frankly, a good balance. It's a really good balance.
That oscillated because of the tension on the fucking wire bearing. I've explained all that.
The tension, so there's less tension. If it's a little tiny surface, there's less potential for friction. Just a fact. And so, the smaller you can make the bearing, the less friction. It's, sort of an idealization. And, so it's almost creating a perfect fulcrum in the sense that the contact point is so thin and so small that not much energy can go through it.
Swung, it wouldn't oscillate. All right, and make them rigid. And then you've got the same problem you're talking about, that the centre of mass of the lever as a whole would be displaced.
Well, I'm just saying you're illustrating the problem. Obviously, when you're tilting this lever in this configuration, this hole moved from here to over here, meaning that the whole mass of the lever moved over to one side. So I'm just saying that's obviously far from any notion of an ideal balance, okay? The ideal triangle, having it pivot on one little tiny point. I mean, it's pretty far from that when you're doing this and doing this to the lever. So I don't know whether there's any point in playing the rest of this, right? I mean, he's just going to, it's clearly not my understanding of a good balance is to tie the lever to a wheel. So I don't know why he's defending that idea, but I guess that's what he's going to do in this video.
If you thought about it. So that isn't any fucking good either, is it? So the best thing to do is put the weights in line with the lever. Can't have the
I'm just saying that that's not traditionally, okay? 1,000 years ago, they didn't think that was a good idea. And 500 years ago, they didn't think that was a good idea. So all the precision balances, the ones that were really sensitive and worked well, didn't do that. So that's my counter argument to you, and that I can understand the logic of making sure that the gravitational mass, the weight of the object, is always pushing from one tiny location in a very specific location, and it doesn't change at all based on the angular motion. So it seems to me a good rule of thumb that hanging the weight makes sure the weight is always pulling in exactly the same location.
Bearing in line, that bloody thing doesn't oscillate, and I've made a film about that, and others have, if you could be asked to look.
So this is more bullshit. I played the video, so and I pointed out how goddamn, they're shitty levers. So,
or acknowledge the truth. Am I angry? Oh, fucking hell.
So, and what is the truth relevant to? I'm just saying, let's say you are correct, that if this hole is precisely in the middle of the lever and you create a lever with a fulcrum that has the same mass above as it has below, okay, that now it won't turn in gravity. So it won't see this, whatever the difference is, it won't see it anymore. And it doesn't matter how many weights I put on it, it won't see that difference as long as there's the same. It won't see the difference whether I have a 10 mass and a 5 mass, or at different locations. It won't be able to see any of that. It'll just see the weights and just stay in one position and say there's an equal amount of pressure on both sides. Something like that. I don't know exactly what you're saying, but you don't really diagram how this weight mass thing happens.
You're an absolute piece of shit, and you are a liar, and you are dishonest.
So again, I'll just point out nothing dishonest. Everything I said, everything I pointed out was me sincerely looking at it and saying, that doesn't make sense to me. And I pointed out why it doesn't make sense to me, and it still doesn't make sense to me. So what did I lie about? I don't think I lied about anything. Okay. See, he's really talking about the initiating energy. He's saying that, if I take all the weights off the lever and I balance the lever so we guarantee that we got the right weight. We got the same weight on this side as we have on that side. And then I can put the lever in any position and there'll be no tendency to seek the balanced plane. Okay, it won't try to go horizontal. It'll just stay in whatever position you place it in. Well, the argument is how does it know? I mean, how is the lever telling the difference between the weighted one and the unweighted one? And he's not going to answer that question.
You will go down. Piro said something on a comment. I was going to get back to him. He said, you won't...
Piro's a colossal coward. I mean, this whole thing has been going on. He hasn't made any videos where he explains how a lever doesn't conserve momentum, or how a spring doesn't conserve momentum, or how hydraulics don't conserve momentum, or how, what's the other one? It's probably some other one. He doesn't think any of these mechanisms conserve momentum. Again, completely against everything conventional physics teaches. So go ahead and link me to the conventional physicist who says they don't have to conserve momentum. I'm talking about total energy momentum. I'm not talking about the Professor Lewin-Silly experiment where they did a plus and minus thing. I'm talking about where the total momentum of the system doesn't have to be conserved. That if a spring has a certain compression, it has a certain capacity to create momentum.
Believe anybody until you do these experiments yourself. I think that's wrong. You will never accept this.
Just more nonsense, right? I mean, I have done the experiments on my own, and I just don't bother doing all of this over and over crap. Okay, and the experiment we really need, I just can't do. I just don't have the space to engineer it well enough to be bothered. But I did actually make an air track, and remember all that stuff. I mean, So why do you have to keep lying about it? I'm saying I'm not the one that should do the experiments because I can't do them as well as they need to be done. Is that something you can't understand, or what? I don't really want to understand why that's a problem for you. I mean, I did the rolling ball experiment. I did the ballistic pendulum experiment. I did the regular, lever experiment. I did, It's not like I haven't done any, and I did the air track experiment. So why are you saying this shit? Oh, because it's convenient to lie. Oh, okay. That's why you're doing it.
Truth, because it would be your philosophy finished. You're not interested in science.
All right, so let's understand. He's defending the fact that they haven't, in 350 years, produced a single experiment demonstrating it takes twice the fuel to go twice as fast. I mean, 4 times the fuel to go twice as fast. They don't have a single experiment, not a single example of anything showing that to be true. And then he's complaining at somebody else about their bad science. I mean, it's laughably bad science for you to make assertions that you haven't come close to proving. So go ahead, prove that this lever balance doesn't conserve momentum. So just do the experiment the other way. Put the 5 mass in and see how fast the 10 mass leaves.
This dalliance into science is an extension of your philosophy. That philosophy which...
It really isn't. I mean, obviously I've pointed out that long before I understood the complete context of being a brain and evolution and all that stuff, I had heard of their description of a photon and thought it ridiculous. Okay, so the physics did come first. My rejection of the silly talk of physics was before my rejection of the silly philosophy of human spirituality.
Declares that the human race is scum. As you keep reminding everybody, you hate this planet, you're stuck on this planet.
Yeah, I'm stuck on a planet with people like you. I mean, how dare you? I mean, draft science deception. There's just no deceptions in the video. I'm expressing my honest observations and explanations, and this moron calls it somehow deceptive. What is deceptive? I draw it on the board, I explain it as best I can, and he says there's a deception somewhere. Where's the deception? And I would just make the counter argument. Doesn't it seem very bizarre that he's made at least, I don't know, 7 versions of these levers and he's never tried it with the dangling weights? Not once? I don't know. Is that plausible?
Everything's fucking terrible fucking... That was the basis of your philosophy in Mendham. The fucking anti-baby thing. I better calm myself down, because I will fucking tell you what I think of you.
Whatever.
Now you're trying to pick on the science and saying, look, the classical mechanics must be wrong as a lie, because the scummy...
So he's completely lying to say classical mechanics is what I'm fighting. I'm defending Galileo, Descartes, and Newton's physics and exactly what they believed. They didn't believe what you believe. They didn't believe there was any squared velocity phenomenon in the universe. So again, is that he's calling somebody else deceptive when he's just overtly lying in just a grotesque manner about what I'm actually defending, which is the reasoning and logic and evidence of levers and such that led Descartes, Galileo, and Newton not to see the existence of this magical living force. So again, I mean, is there any other thing to say? I mean, how do you judge the man's character when he can lie like that about what Newton, Galileo, and Descartes defended? Their classical physics worked, it got right answers, and there was no deficit shown anywhere. There was no error that was corrected by mv squared. Let's understand, there was no error corrected by mv squared. And he's just lying, okay, to say that somehow I'm attacking that physics, when of course I'm defending that physics.
Humans couldn't have got it right. They wouldn't have got it right. They're not clever enough. You're trying to prove that they're...
So isn't it this just so ironic, right? Here I am defending the fact that they did get it right, and you broke it. You, with this new cult religion, showed up and said it's not godly enough, okay? It doesn't have enough magic in it, okay? You're insulting God by making the universe too simple. That's what happened, okay? That's the actual history. People clung to this bullshit because they wanted the universe to be more fun, okay, than the dull, mechanical, conserve the momentum shit. Big M, little v, big V, little m, the end. They didn't want that story. They wanted something with, witches and warlocks and Henry Potter in it.
Dishonest in every aspect. So nothing can be right, including the science. Because they're idiocrats in every respect.
So just more bullshit. I mean, I argued at first gravitational theory, and then the two slit came up and I said, whoa, this photon theory is nuts too. And then I fell upon this, why do they say 1/2 mv squared? What the hell, Hothliday made a video and he had the formula written down. I just... What the hell is that? And even Hothliday said some little kind of snarky remark that, that mathematically he didn't know why there was a square, that, it is dicey. He said something. He implied that maybe that is a bit of dicey physics. So he was sort of conceding that, yes, well, I think he was a momentumist too, in a sense, but who knows, deep down. But regardless, that's the history. The videos are all public. The whole history is online. I mean, why do you go lying about something that is so easily researched?
We know through hundreds of years of evidence, and that evidence is machines working, the classical mechanics is...
So, again, he says it again, of machines working using 4 times the fuel to go twice as fast. I mean, why wasn't that noticed by anybody? You know, why? It's really not a known fact. 4 times the fuel, twice the speed. Yeah, it's just not a known fact.
It's correct.
So he said it again. Classical physics is correct. I don't know what you're talking about. I mean, it's just amazing. 1/2 mv squared is not classical mechanics. It's just absolute lying horseshit to sit there and say it's in that Newton was a believer and Galileo was a believer and Descartes was a believer, because they weren't. It's just such a fucking lie.
They couldn't lie about that. But getting back to the point, you will never accept it, because that would mean your philosophy is finished, dead and buried. Your hatred.
Look, he's saying that their physics is magical, and yes, if I'm right that no, physics isn't magical, yes, okay, you're right. If there's a God, then I'm wrong, but I'm damn sure there isn't one. So I'll continue doing as I'm doing for the truth and the benefits of people understanding the truth and not believing in fables and silly fucking wishful thinking.
Your philosophy of hatred. Now I think it's self-hatred. Now I'll be careful what I say now.
Yeah, so now he's going to do psychobabble. So again, this is one of the funniest things people do, is to try to say that this is because I'm somehow self dissatisfied, and that's why I'm doing all this, is because whatever, I'm not getting what I want or some kind of crap like that. When clearly I'm very self-satisfied. I'm perfectly capable of saying I've been very lucky not to be you, and I'm really, really grateful. I mean, every day is like a be grateful for not being Ian Gostling day or Stephen Brozo day. I mean, I'm just so damn grateful that this awareness isn't trapped in that shit head. That's something I'm really happy about. No doubt about it. Very happy to be me and not you.
There are ways you can find out the origin of some forms of self-hatred in certain ethnics, and it's quite well known, and it goes back a long way.
So that's his own personal theory also, the living force and the personal ethnic, whatever the personal ethnic thing is. So you have this ethnic crazy bug, Jesus. Yeah, please elaborate, until you get all the way to the, talking about the darkies or something. Gee, what a moron.
I suggest your projection of hatred of others is really the hatred of yourself, the self-loathing.
Well, it's like your other theories, I will, over time, eventually, you will be on the pile of, boy, what a stupid shit talker he was. That's the pile you'll be on, okay? And it will be under the outhouse, that pile.
I mean, to describe that woman, lady, what's her name, as a slut.
I'm not the only one who says it, okay? Because frankly, they profile her as being, sexually promiscuous or some other word. I mean, she obviously was rather liberal, okay, in terms of her sexual participation.
I mean, you're just... I don't have the words for you, Gary. So you will never accept evidence.
So you really just can't call a gigolo, and you can't call a slut for some reason, right? You just can't call them what they are. I mean, she apparently kind of, I mean, there's nude pictures of her in the diagrams of her physics, right? There's, they're really nice artistic renderings. And she's sort of diagramming her place in physics and science. And so, she's there with Galileo or Newton or somebody else in the picture. And she's got her breasts hanging out. I mean, what the fuck? Come on. That's not a bit exploitive? You're doing a science book,
Whether you do it yourself or somebody else shows you. Because it's the end of your philosophy that the human race is corrupt.
Whatever. So he says, because levers oscillate at a different speed, I've proven human beings are great. I don't think so. They're not bugs. They can sing and dance. Some of them don't even sing and dance well, like Brozo.
Because if this science is right, then humans have done something good. They've been pretty damn clever. And you can't accept that. Because that goes against your philosophy.
So he's defending the cleverness of strapping a balance to a round wheel. No, I don't think Newton did that.
Hatred of humanity, doesn't it? So there's nothing wrong with this fucking lever. If I didn't put the bearing up here, the damn thing wouldn't oscillate. And I've shown that. And others have.
Well, apparently it's going to oscillate in his future video where he has the bearing in the middle. So I don't know why he left this video up then. But we'll see.
Shown it. There's nothing out of balance with it. There's nothing odd. All balances. The reason I made two was to show.
Yeah, I didn't complain about there being two. So, that's great, frankly. But
that they oscillate together. That's the reason I went to all the freaking trouble to.
Yeah, and again, the freaking trouble is that there's no way to draw your body diagram here, because the force of gravity on a hanging weight here is the same as the force of gravity on a hanging weight here, and there's no explanation for why this side thinks it's heavier, because it's not any heavier. So all you can talk about is, like I said, and if you put it right in the center, you could have to argue that whatever change you make in the center of mass isn't a change in the center of mass, because, as much goes on one side as comes up from the bottom on the other side. So you're not really moving the center of mass. So if you're not moving the center of mass, how does the lever know it's supposed to go down? That there's actually physically more mass on one side than the other. And again, mass is the important word here. So obviously if there's only a 5 mass over here, how does it work? Because the 5 mass could never push down, because it could never collect more energy, frankly, because it's only a 5 mass. How could it collect more gravitational weight? Can't. So the lever's doing it.
Help you? It's to show they oscillate together, and then when you alter the distribution of the masses,
I mean, you can see it kind of obvious in this close-up, right? You get the point, right? It's a wheel. He's tied it to a wheel. I could make this wheel bigger and bigger, and the lever would swing all the way over here and swing all the way over here. I mean, it's obviously moving the whole lever. Not a good idea. The whole balance is moving. Balances aren't made this way. So again, he's saying that this is a classical balance. It's not a classical balance.
Bloody well don't oscillate together. One goes like that and one goes like that, It's the inertia.
So he keeps saying the word inertia. So he's saying lighter things have more inertia. That's the irony of his statement, right? So most of physics will define inertia as mass, as a synonym for mass. It's just really saying heavy things are harder to push than light things. And that's inertia. But he's actually saying I can go infinitesimally light and go further down the lever, and somehow that infinitesimally light thing has more inertia. whatever that would be. It has more mass. When no, it clearly doesn't have more mass.
Stupid person. And as for your freaking gravity nonsense, you disprove yourself with it. You keep using these.
So it'd be nice if he would just draw a diagram of how gravity works and how, the higher you go up from the surface of the Earth, you get into more and more gravity. And you're getting heavier and heavier. So the higher you go, the heavier you get. That's his theory.
Example of a sphere emitting or receiving gravity, according to your model, and moving past it quicker. You're moving past the sphere from outside of its influence, in it, and then past it again. You're out of it.
Yeah, so what? It's all equal on one side to the other side. So you're just saying there's an average amount of gravitational pressure. But again, even if I flatten the Earth, the same exact rules apply. So what's the difference? It's the same. You're just saying it's in a certain amount of gravity for a certain period of length of distance. And the fact is the amount of distance, you're traveling is going to be amount of time at a velocity. So the faster you go, the less time you'll be associated with that line. And the less you're associated with it, the less you'll be influenced. I mean, the argument is just as solid can be. And, I really shouldn't have to draw that again, right? Earth, flyby, you're bent more, the slower you go. The more time you spend getting hit by the force, the more the force bends you. Same is true just shooting bullets. Shoot them slow, they crash into the Earth. Shoot them fast, they go much further because there's less gravity per foot hitting them. They absorb less downward motion because the time is the same, right? The time of the very far bullet is the same amount of time as the close bullet. Alright, should be back. Busy morning.
It's not constant. On the surface of the Earth, we're constantly in the gravity.
Yeah, and you go a little bit lower, less gravity. You go a little higher, less gravity. Yeah, the maximum's on the surface. The surface is the highest input gravitational pressure.
I don't get any heavier on the scales by standing on them longer.
So you are putting more pressure on the ground. The ground gets hotter. Just kind of a fact. If you could put you on a surface that was very cold, so to speak, and then you could see the heat difference. But obviously the Earth is already very big and very dense, and so the heat isn't visible. But you are imposing a pressure on the Earth. It has to move you back, and that movement is heat. Newsflash.
A stupid idea.
So again, he doesn't understand gravity as an inverse squared moving force. I think even Einstein knew it was a moving force. Leonard Susskind teaches it as a moving force.
Your paint sprayer machine. It will create a jet of paint about a metre wide. You come running into the room, you're outside of the...
It's an even paint sprayer, just like an even light bulb. So it's just like it was shooting little particles of paint, just like light is shot. And it's moving away. The paint particles are moving away from each other in both directions, in the sense that the density is getting lighter and lighter the further away you go. So the further away you go from the paint sprayer, the less paint will hit a surface. Okay. It's really a simple concept. It's not worthy of debate in the sense that it's just so well established as a conceptual idea, and it's just ludicrous that I have to explain it over and over again, that these mechanisms not just duplicate what gravity does, they perfectly duplicate it.
Influence. You run into the spray and then out of it again. The faster you run through it, the less paint will hit you. That's not what happens in gravity.
Okay, so he's saying it doesn't happen in gravity, and I'm clearly asserting, oh yes it does, exactly like that. You won't show me how it doesn't work that way. You won't be able to undo the diagrams I've drawn. It's just insane, insensitive, for you to argue that gravity isn't a time-dependent 9.8 meters per second force. Yes, the amount of time you're in gravity free falling will decide how much force you collect. Period.
Gravity is everywhere. It's about a mile long, say. So you running faster through the mile, you're not getting more or less gravity. It's constant. You can't.
So again, it is constant. That's exactly the point. And if you're in it less time, you get less of it. So if you're running 10 feet of distance in the rain, you're getting less wet. There's no way you can get more wet. You have to get less wet. Okay. It's just too silly to have this argument. That the faster I go through the paint sprayer, the less spray gets on my hand. It's just a fact.
Alter it. It's a stupid argument.
I'm just surprised he is. I'm surprised because I just don't know what's your counter theory. Einstein says it's an inverse square amount of force. He's completely agreeing that it's doing exactly what a light bulb does in reverse, in the sense if photons, attracted you rather than repelled you, it would be exactly the same thing. It would function exactly as gravity functions. It fits the diagram perfectly in terms of how the force is collected, how the force interacts with an object. It works perfectly.
And you're stupid and dishonest.
So, what can you say, right? Dishonest about what? So that was just a terribly stupid video. So I'm sorry he made a video that stupid. I thought there would be something close to a concession. Okay, yeah, it's probably better to have the fulcrum not move. We don't want to change the whole center of mass of the entire lever. That would kind of ruin the whole balancing thing. So yeah, let's throw that idea out and move on. But instead of making that simple concession, all of that crap. So we post a link to a video, a proof about not oscillating, and he has seen all this many times. So I don't even know what he's talking about, but I guess that's his next video, right? So he's linked to his own video. Okay, fine enough. But to defend tying the lever to a bicycle wheel was really dumb. Okay, this is a very astute summing up of his motivation of attacking conventional science. So all this psychobabble. I just don't know how any reasonable person could watch my more than 20,000 videos I've made and say there's anything ungenuine in them. I mean, it's just so preposterously silly. The guy has no intention of learning. And learning what? What? Okay. What galls me is the way he used to go around saying he had more integrity than most. What a piece of work he is. Well, I mean, you're demonstrating it right here, right? I mean, what are these statements you're making? They're showing your integrity? I don't think so. If it's any help, Ian, this really perked me up hearing you just call him what he is. What did he call me? And how exactly is me? Okay, we all start out polite, then at some point realize this ain't ain't listening. So again, there was nothing starting out polite about Stephen Bro. Okay, he was a liar right from the first time I met him in terms of his motivations. So whatever. A see you next Tuesday is exactly what he is. I don't even know what that means, but I won't even try to understand. So Piero is engaging in this little texty thing, but he won't bother making a video, drawing a lever. So even though 2 years, and I have said I will pay Piero to do it. I mean, if that's what it takes, I have to pay him. Yeah, you're right. He'd deny his own results or miscount them or say close enough. So again, I've done the experiments and I basically didn't do any of that. I analyzed the experiments as best I could, their flaws, and pointed those flaws out and said, yeah, well, this isn't really good enough. I said that. When it confirmed what I was saying, I said, yeah, it's not good enough. So these are just lies. Okay. But I would like to see him do it. Do what? I should make Frankenstein in my laboratory? Come on, it's just so silly. Why should I be doing it? I don't have the hardware. There's, again, thousands of teaching institutions, colleges, high schools, all kinds of stuff with all kinds of equipment. Why don't they do these simple lever experiments? Whatever this is, FWIW. Your demonstrations have helped me understand better how to explain and understand the relevant things. How there's more gravity the higher you go. Well, I'm glad you learned that, Piero. That's an important thing to understand, that yes, there's more gravity the higher you go, which are relevant quite outside in Mendham. So again, he keeps saying in Mendham, it's draft science. You can't even follow along that much. Oh, cheers. Isn't that nice? They both doing a little cheery thing. That's nice to know because the intended recipient will never appreciate them. Appreciate what? I mean, you just basically lied about what I've done in the past, what I've said. You've called me deceptive somehow, like somehow there's some evidence that I believe something else and I'm arguing for some reason to misinform or something. I mean, it's just such a stupid accusation. All right. Interesting and plausible view about his motives. So it sounded plausible to you? It didn't sound plausible to me, so I didn't get it. I still don't get it. They just can't accept that some people aren't religious kooks, I guess. And I just don't fall for any old Jesus theory. Okay, you should be able to produce the 4 times the fuel for twice the speed experiment. All the electrical motors, all the different kind of mechanisms that use fuel and then produce an output, and they can't show us one experiment, okay, where it takes 4 times the fuel to get twice the velocity out of something. Not one. And they'll insult other people. Disgraceful. So I'm assuming, oh dear, commercials. So let's see, make sure this is the 2 months ago. Oh, well, this is no value. Yeah. So we'll go to his newest video. But let's see what this was. Ads. Amazing.
Watch me do my...
Amazing. So this is his old lever, 2 balances on it. Okay, and so let's see what he's going to prove in this video. I did turn unpaused, didn't I? Yeah, I did. Okay. Oh, I have to put this up. Okay. Actually, you should be able to see this one. All right, so let's see what kind of slop is in here.
Put a bearing in there. Quite friction-free. Nice. And it does balance, and it's very, very sensitive. Very sensitive.
Well, so it's not obviously not sensitive because it's not balancing. So.
For instance, I put a tiny little thin washer, about 1/2 mil thick, on there.
I mean, that's not very sensitive, frankly. I mean, it's a piece of metal. It's real weight, frankly.
And then it doesn't balance. That's just to give you an indication of how sensitive this thing is. Now, it tends to balance in any position you leave it.
Hey, right, and I explained how that's because of the higher friction that's actually on the bearings. And so the differential isn't enough to cause it to swing down. Now, in these new experiments he's doing, he's basically lifting this side up, and then the side is dropping. So what's going to be the difference between this setup and the new setup where he lifts them up and then lets them go and they fall and oscillate? So why did this one not oscillate, and why are the new ones going to oscillate? I mean, the same masses, same thing. It's the same configuration, and it oscillates. Well, why isn't this one oscillating? The one in your new video will oscillate. So we'll point that out. Okay, so in this experiment, he's saying, look, I proved it doesn't oscillate. So let's see what his newest video is doing. I'm pretty sure it's going to be oscillating on a bearing in the center. So it's going to not make much sense. He's going to put them in a position, and they're going to move to oscillate to balance. And why are they going to do that? All right, so let's do that. All right, so draft science proved wrong again.
You'll find another one.
Okay, so here we have the same setup, right? He just has the masses now below the lever, so that's the only difference. The masses have changed, not the fulcrum. So he has the same center fulcrum that he claimed before was the cause. So what he's basically saying is when the masses are inside, I mean when there's the same amount of mass above as below, then the lever doesn't move, right? That was the difference. He had round things here in the center. So now they're not in the center, and these will move. So he's sort of conceding the point. How you hang the mass has everything to do with why it falls, why it tries to balance. So the entire reason why it tries to balance has to do with these weights being above or below the center line. And if they're on the center line, then you won't get it to, it won't recognize that this is in higher gravity. It won't see that anymore, right? The point is that it's clearly tied to the cause, is the fact that this mass is not in line with the rest of the mass of the lever. So if you can take some of the mass out of alignment with the rest of the lever, that's when it becomes a real balance, in the sense that that's when the lever will be capable of moving. But I still say he's sort of wrong, but just because I have a lever over there and I take the weights off and it still wants to balance. But that's because my fulcrum's probably up a little or it's down a little. So if you're not dead in the center, then the lever will see the difference. So this video just goes on and on. There's this so whatever, we'll play some of it anyway. So I did watch this one, and it doesn't, like I said, it doesn't change anything about this. It doesn't advance the argument at all. And I'm just kind of stunned that he would go to the trouble to zip tie the weights. Why wouldn't you just hang them? I mean, after all these conversations about all the statements I've made, why wouldn't you just satisfy Gary's silly notion that hanging makes a difference? A difference, part of the difference. But the fact is, you're using gravity to initiate the force, and that's the tricky part. You need to use some external force. Because the fact is the lever with the 5 mass further out, the half mass further out, the entire lever does in fact weigh less. And apparently that can matter.
Taking out the bolts. That's that excuse gone.
Taking out the bolts, it's not an excuse. I just suggested that it would be better if you can move the weights around and do things and not have a permanent bolt in the lever. It just adds more mass, and it's just more things to go wrong. So if you can do without it, have some other mechanism to attach to the lever that isn't some sort of rivets and bolts and something less variable than it needs to be, so that you can tweak it and play with it a little bit. But that's all. I said that's desirable. You don't understand? Okay. Just like you don't understand the desirability of a standard release or a quick release. These concepts aren't appealing to you. I find them appealing as somebody going to judge experiments these are all good things. You don't want to do it, that's your business, okay? Yeah. I'm just saying it's not ideal to not do these things. All right, I kept taking pause again. All right, I'm back. Okay, so what sort of has been established is if everything is in alignment, that is, the mass is in alignment with the fulcrum, then just lifting the lever won't produce a potential difference. That's somehow the real gravitational fact that this side of the lever is being pushed down just as much as this side of the lever is being pushed down, and there is no differential. And it's the fact that the masses aren't in line with the center of the mass of the lever is why it balances, why it recognizes this position to be out of balance, is because of these angular differences. And that this energy is a small amount of energy because it's only measuring this angular difference, the amount of difference created by this distance from the center of the fulcrum. And it's not like a 10-ton train hitting the lever. This is just being created by that differential in the angles of the mass. So the more the angles are different, the more the lever tries to balance. But it's not like you put a 10-pound weight on it and it's a lot of energy. It's a small amount of energy initiating the oscillation.
Zip tie 2 weights here, 2, 2, 2.
So again, so this is just like his other previous video where he's now got the lever, okay, with a center, but this one doesn't oscillate nearly as well because it's not a bearing as far as we can tell anyway. Hard to see. It's just a nail hole. Yeah, see they die down a little quicker.
Oscillate. Synchronism.
Synchronism, he calls it. Now, obviously, the point being made is that when you put the 5 mass out here, the total mass of one of the levers is less than the total mass of the other lever. And so, whatever this differential that's creating the motion of balance, it's doing it with less total mass in one case than the other case. And that's why one of them oscillates with less energy. One of them actually moves slower, which means it has a total less energy because obviously the mass you didn't change is moving slower than it did in the first case. And the smaller mass, okay, the lighter mass further out isn't moving at the same 2-to-1 relationship with the first lever. It's in a 2-to-1 relationship with the slower weight. The two masses moving at a different speed. This side of the lever is moving at a different speed. So we will get to that point. So I guess let's just go there. So we've confirmed that it oscillates in sequence when they have exactly the same mass in the same location. And now we're going to change the mass of the total mass of the lever is going to change from 4 to 3. Still not there yet. Well, we'll play it just for the sake of...
Excuse on it. The lever was mounted below the pivot. Alright, taking that out then, so no complaints there, Gary.
Yeah, okay, so yeah, I was wrong. I'm just saying it's still wrong to put the lever on a wheel. So I'm saying the same effect is in effect in the sense you're changing where the center of mass of the lever is. And now you're doing it by suspending the weights below the lever. But it'd be even better if you had them hanging because then we wouldn't have this angular issue. And maybe the angular issue has something to do with it. But I'm not saying it does. I'm just saying it wouldn't even occur to me to strap the weights to the lever. It wouldn't even occur to me. Why wouldn't I just dangle them?
I'm sure you'll find another one.
Well, I'm sure you'll keep forcing experiments to fit, your for demonstration purposes, what you're attempting to demonstrate. So you really are honestly telling me you've never tried dangling the weights. Okay. Hard to believe, but okay, fine.
Excuses, excuses. Now we're going to take one weight out and move it out here.
Let's understand what the excuse was. He has the lever tied to a wheel. Okay, it's a pretty good excuse to say I wouldn't do the experiment that way. It's a pretty good reason to say, well, if something's broken, that would be a good cause. All right. So he has to cut the zip tie. So, I mean, all this trouble, right? So, again, I'm saying that's far from ideal.
Well, it's a perfectly good zip tie.
Yeah, see? Well, why would somebody do it that way? Exactly.
For you. Said the actress to the bishop.
Yeah, whatever. It's okay. So he didn't say anything. He's just tying his weight on there. So all of this just to tie the weight. So just look at all that trouble. When he could have just taken a piece of bent wire, you know, made a loop out of it and hang the weights by the bent wire. I mean, not a big deal.
Twice the distance. Now let's see what they do.
So they certainly, the one in the back didn't oscillate very much, so it ground to a halt so fast. And yet the one with less momentum, the one oscillating slower, oscillated longer. So even that's kind of curious.
Interfered. Just cut him off.
Apparently the zip tie hit the other lever, so I think that's what happened. Not a perfect video. Alright, so there they are, out of sequence. Now the reason why they're out of sequence is the one with the lighter mass on the end,
Get out of the way.
the one that has, you know, a quarter less total mass hanging on it. The one that has less mass is absorbed less energy from the differential in the gravitational differential that he created by yeah, the only energy you're putting in is some sort of gravitational differential. There's no other source of energy in this experiment. So he's not pushing in a set amount of energy. He's acquiring the energy based on how much of this stuff weighs and how fast how much energy it gains through falling. Now obviously the lighter mass, the feather versus the hammer, the lighter mass will collect less force through the same travel in gravity. So clearly the one that has less mass is collecting less gravity. So it's collecting less momentum, and that's why it's moving slower. It's because it has less energy. Because of the way you put the energy in through gravity, recognizing the mass of the lever. So on your face, lifted up, you'd say this side has to be moved faster. It's got a lighter weight on it. But he even pushes it down and releases it up, which means the lighter mass is up higher. And you're saying, why should the lighter mass push down and lift up the heavier mass? So that doesn't really work intuitively. So again, it's really not about the masses. It's about the angles that the masses are traveling. And you really can't change that. Even if you do dangle it, you still got a problem in the sense the masses will be moving to the left and to the right. And that has something to do with changing the center of mass of the lever and therefore causing the lever to rise and fall. But it really doesn't change the experiment that if you actually put this horizontally on the ground and got rid of the gravity, that there really wouldn't be any of these influences anymore. And that if you put a 10-ton train going 5 miles an hour in on one side, you can produce the 5-ton train going 10 miles on the other side. And he's really a billion light years away from proving that to be untrue. And that's what this argument fundamentally is about. do levers conserve kinetic energy? He's certainly not proving it with this experiment. Versus momentum.
There's no doubt that is moving slower. So now what's your excuse going to be? You'll find another one. It does accelerate.
There's no excuses beyond the fact that this is all to be explained. You're not explaining how any of it works, and your explanations are based on dopey notions where you think there's more gravity further away from the Earth. So, I mean, you're not even coming close to providing any explanation. So, and again, there's no evidence here that kinetic energy theory is validated in any way. We have less energy in the object that's supposed to have more velocity, and it doesn't. There's less energy in this lever. How does that prove conservation of anything?
Slower, as predicted by science.
So there's no prediction. No, this is all a lie. There's no science that predicts it. There's no greater inertia. It's a 5 pound. It's a less mass. There's less inertia. There's no reason to think there's more inertia. That's all just stuff he made up. It's not in any textbook anywhere. It's not in any physics lecture anywhere. He'll never show me a reference to this theory of his that this inertia thing is more. Lighter things have more inertia. It's just absolute his personal nonsense. It's not part of any physics anywhere. This inertia thing that he's making up.
Well, it has to try and accelerate. To go at the same speed as the back one, it would be accelerating quicker.
It's again, it would, yes, to go the same speed, it would be going the same speed. It's obviously not going the same speed because it doesn't have the same force in it. Because it doesn't have the same mass. It's a lighter lever. It hasn't collected the same amount of gravitational force because it has less mass. Total mass of the lever is less. That's why you collected less force. It's because you had less mass to work with. Feathers hit the ground and go boom. Hammers hit the ground and go boom. Mass collects gravity. Okay. So anyway, I guess there's no point playing the rest of it, is there? No, I don't think there is.
Because it's further distance.
And I do have things to do.
Nature conserves energy.
So more nonsense. Nature conserves what energy? Energy. Kinetic energy, you're saying. It conserves mv squared. All of these devices will be explained by physics as conserving momentum, not mv squared. So again, part of his lie is to say that there's any conventional theory that argues that springs don't conserve momentum and that levers don't conserve momentum. It's not what physics says.
That's the job of the inertia. And the same force cannot accelerate them at the same speed. I mean, it's taking out the bulbs.
Oops, it's the same force at a completely different... Alright, sorry. It's always something. Well, it's always something lately. Anyway, this morning.
Accelerate them at the same speed. I mean, it's clear.
So the acceleration is just the initial energy going in. So there's obviously a differential. It overshoots the energy, then it has to overshoot the other way, and it just have to wait for that energy to die out, to be absorbed by the friction of the bearing. So the initial energy has something to do with it seeking to balance, and the obvious point is that the one lever does in fact weigh less than the other lever, and that's why it collects less force, is because it weighs less. Just a fact.
Only a fucking lying tosspot is going to deny it still.
Deny what? Your made up argument that there's magical inertia in the lighter mass. The lighter mass has magical inertia and therefore doesn't obey the rules of the 2-to-1 relationship that it's in concerning its weight. When, yes, of course it does.
After all of these tests.
All of these tests that don't involve a constant force being applied that isn't gravity, that is, really comparing two weights. are two impact forces. So again, and obviously, if you're going to use gravity as the source, clearly all I do is move these weights to different positions and I can eliminate that source entirely. So as he just pointed out, if he puts this weight in line with the lever, it doesn't move at all. No energy is collected. So, I mean, not to recognize that that's an important subtlety, and you have to explain why that happens. Why is it different? The mass is in the center of the lever. It doesn't oscillate. It doesn't collect any energy. And somehow it does collect energy when the mass isn't in the center, in line with the center. But he explains none of this, like I said.
It doesn't matter how I do it.
He just talks
I'm not
jargon.
gonna spend all night doing it. Anyway, you won't accept it because
the point is to understand it and explain it. And where have you done any of that? Where have you done anything to explain what you're this stupid, again, you say it, inertia. Show me the definitions of this word inertia that has to do with somehow lighter masses having more inertia. Okay? Because I don't see that lecture anywhere. I didn't see that any professor saying that.
your hatred. But anybody that wants to know, anybody that listens to you, they will know. Because they'd be frightened to say anything.
So again, he's saying that if I did make this lever and I plowed a 5-ton train into this side when it's balanced, and I put two 10-ton trains on the other side at half the distance, that I will complete the conversion. The twice as energetic 5-ton train will in fact make two 10-ton trains going half the speed. Good luck with that experiment. Yeah. Anyway, okay, so that's enough. Too silly. Too irritating. Well, let's just play the end.
Little misery club. That's the end of it. I'm not doing any more.
Oh, good. You don't do them well, and you do them with this terribly stupid and ignorant attitude, so yeah, why bother? You're an expert. Okay, fine. You say light things have more inertia. Okay. You say levers conserve kinetic energy. Did you show any of that? No. Did you prove any of that? No. You say 8-pound bowling balls going twice the speed knock down twice as many pins. Okay. Did you show me? No. You say it takes 4 times the fuel to go twice as fast. Did you show me? No. So, I mean, just more horseshit. And you're going to, have the expectation that only an idiot wouldn't know this innately from birth, that yes, you have to use 4 times the fuel to go twice as fast. Every idiot knows that when they're born. I mean, isn't that the default, obvious thing to believe? No, it really isn't. All right, anyway, so till the next time and such and so forth and whatnot. Oh, I should read the comments. Oh, it says 9 and there's only 2? Whatever. Puro again. So, the period of oscillation here doesn't seem like a regular pendulum. It has to do with angular inertia. So he's asking the question, whatever angular inertia is. Again, the word inertia is just a word for mass. The more mass, the harder something, the more energy something needs to move a velocity. There's no magic to the word inertia. So again, I don't know why they're doing this shit. And obviously the angular part is playing a role here. So that's the part you're trying to, in my opinion, eliminate. And that's why, hanging objects from the lever is probably a better idea. But I don't know if that gets rid of it entirely. So, maybe there's still going to be a change just because the fact is the two levers weigh differently. One of them has more mass. They both have the same weight on them, but one of them does have more mass. Weight and mass are different things. So he says squared. I don't know what that means. He is just a wrong gun. I don't know what that means. I was going to counter that with cubed, but I'm going all out. I don't know what any of that means, so I should never have looked at the comments. Let's see what the missing ones are. Oh, Brozo. Oh, okay, it's this. He's got a whole pile of it this time. Oh, we did a whole paragraph. Going back 2 years or more, old empty head did concede to being wrong within a few hours of threatening. Oh, he's talking about the 4 times the higher, twice the velocity video I made where I was just totally wrong. So he's dragging that up again for 1 hour, for 1 day, 6 hours. Yeah, I just had a wrong idea in my head because I hadn't really thought it through very well. Just like I could play the quote of Ian Gostling, Ian, saying the one side of the lever is higher than the other, and therefore it's getting more gravity. I mean, it's obviously wrong and stupid. Should I just play it over and over again for the rest of his life? I was just too stupid. I always imagined trusted friend tripped him off. No, this is such bullshit. Who gives a shit about any of that kind of crap? You're a lying little sack of shit. That's the truth. Okay. You've never done an honest day's anything in your life. I mean, if you just go back to the videos where he's talking about his best buddies and how they're all disgusting criminals, who, will stick their finger in a jar of food and then put it back on the shelf, that kind of stuff. Really disgusting stuff. Frankly, I'm past caring whether he sees it or not because I don't know his verdict in advance. That all pathetic part of it all, whatever that means. The only thing he is... So again, in 2 years I've been begging for one of these morons to draw a lever and explain how it works, and they won't do it. They won't draw a lever and explain the force diagram. Explain how the kinetic energy is moving through the lever. Alright, so he's saying I didn't watch some kind of video, that's a lie, blah blah blah, so it's just all lies. And I'm not going to bother reading his lies. At least I got full permission to use my friend's image and singing for the very purpose of winding him up. What is that? So yeah, when we were doing physics videos, he forced me to listen to some friend of his, some, whatever, welfare whore, singing. And, that was part of physics conversation. No, that was called a waste of my goddamn time. Like I'm a music critic or something. No, I'm not even that. But I'm certainly not a music lover. Do you remember his discussion on the Naked Science forum? Yes, I have it on my website. The one where he eventually got booted. Yes, for absolutely no good reason. That's sort of obvious right in the video that I never started insulting anybody. I never did anything to initiate any cause to end the conversation. He stole their HTML code for the forum pages and published exact copies on his webpage. Well, isn't that just disgusting? Somebody copying something and doing the exact stuff and showing exactly what they did? I mean, I'm part of the conversation and I'm not allowed to have a tape recording. Only the police can decide whether something gets recorded. Is that your theory? Oh, you're on the cop's side. Turn the camera off when we're, punching somebody in the face and only turn the camera on when we're petting kittens. Is that your theory of how the internet should work? What's funny is how he describes people who create duplicate websites as cheats and fraud. So how's the cheat and fraud? I didn't steal anything from them. I even left the code for the advertisements so their ads were still showing. They were still getting ad revenue from my copy. So even that's bogus. But what would you call about an open forum praetoratory? I mean, why should those conversations be owned by somebody, and why shouldn't somebody else be able to publish? So every time you publish a transcript from YouTube, do you really think you're stolen something? I mean, that's rather amazing, frankly. So it turns out he's a self-confessed cheat and fraud. No, I'm a self-confessed believer that other people shouldn't be able to secrete away from the public their crimes. Okay, and IP theft, so I didn't steal any IP. That's just absolute nonsense. His accusations are always confessions, so what a fucking disgustingly stupid lie. I mean, just an amazingly stupid accusation to make. You know, if you use your iPhone to videotape a cop beating somebody up, somehow it's pretoritory. The cop should own his behavior. You know, you shouldn't be able to out him, you know, with your videotape coverage. No, if I'm in a conversation and other people treat me shabbily, I have a right to make sure that conversation doesn't disappear. But anyway, this morons. So that's Steve Godfrey's explanation of how a lever works. Hilarious. But yeah, hilarious. Yes, please, more people, go look up. You know, you can get it from my website, or you could actually go to that stupid Naked Science forum, and it's still up. You know, it's still there, I think. Accessible. I mean, it's not very accessible. You have to search for it. But the fact is, the conversation's there. Go read the conversation and see how they evaded the subject, you know, of the 10-ton train and the 5-ton train. How they evaded the subject of it doesn't take 4 times the fuel to go twice as fast. How they just evaded producing a single bit of evidence in defense of their theory. All right. So now it's enough. All right. So till the next time, and such and so forth and whatnot. Oof, 2 hours almost.